This is John Carrington for Eye on Baltimore, and our eye is going to be on the Maryland Historical Society. Why? Because they sponsored the fabulous 1812 fashion show. The War of 1812. Remember the bombardment of Fort McHenry? Well, those folks had a certain style of clothing and a certain style of social grace, and you're going to get a chance to see a slice of that at the Maryland Historical Society during the fabulous 1812 fashion show. So don't touch that dial. Eye on Baltimore has some good information for you. You're going to have a great time. Don't change that channel. We'll be right back.
Is here. You see the focus on antiquity. This particular evening gown was copied directly from a fashion empire period ladies' fashion. Notice the high waistline. I know some of the gentlemen are. The puffy shoulder sleeves. The simplicity of design and the lightness of fabrics to show the full Grecian form. Remember, to be educated, you study the Greek and Alexander modeling this because the fashion is directly inspired from the Middle East, of course, like Alexandria, with the British armies in India, French troops garrisoning posts in the Middle East. These Eastern and Indian touches made their way. So here we see the lovely Grecian and Romanesque forms heavily influenced by the color and dash and panache of the Middle East and in India. You see the fine cotton dress and how sporting a blue floral on a nice cream base, clothes into winter. Allow me to introduce Molly Urtel for the early fall, late summer, and Cecilia Dowdley with our winter dress edition.
Welcome back to Eye on Baltimore. You know, I had a wonderful experience. I went to the Maryland Historical Society to the 1812 fashion show, and I saw military people dressed in full costume who were actually in the battle. Well, actually, they pretended they were in the battle of 1812, the bombardment of Fort McHenry, and the wonderful job that those military people did in defending our great city and defending our nation. So we got something we want you to watch here. Take a look at this.
Okay.
We're back with Howard Kuntz, Fabulous Fashions of 1812. That was a big fight. You were there. You saw what happened at the fort. What did your character see?
Well, I manned the outer battery, comprised of 18 and 36-pound naval guns, cannons. And we were there from the very beginning to the very end. Throughout the night, the rainstorm, the wind. It was a night to remember, you might say. Cold, very, very frightening, smoke, the screaming of the rockets coming over, the bombs that was coming through. You could see the bombs as they came across. It took about 14 seconds probably for the shell from the firing of the mortar from the gun, which was 1.5 miles away, 2 miles. We could see the aperture of the gun, the bomb, and hopefully it didn't hit us.
Wow.
But we had to dodge those 300-pound mortar shells from the British.
All right, the average age of the Americans was 18 years of age, and you had to command people who were within that age range. What was that like?
Well, it's no problem whatsoever. We were all there for the duration. We knew what was at stake, and we followed the orders that was given to us by our gunners.
All right. What did you learn from experiencing the fashion show and wearing the hat? How did it affect you personally?
Well, you have a better grasp of history, for one. You have a better grasp for what the men of the 1800 era, the 1812 era, went through. We tried to live it, we tried to experience it on our scale. And we tried to impart this to our visitors from all over the world. Every weekend we see people from almost every continent, and they always have the best questions, and we try to impart those questions with a good answer.
Why the short waistcoat?
Well, the outfit that we're wearing is the normal outfit for a sailor of that era. There was no uniformity of the outfit. It was drawn from the quarters of the ship. Your pants could be sailcloth, or they could be cotton. The waistcoat, as we call it, a waistcoat, is just a vest. The blue jacket, everybody in the Navy wore a blue jacket. The British, the Americans. Even today, when you go into the Navy, you get a manual called the Blue Jackets Manual. And the tie served a lot of purposes. During bombardment, you'd take the tie off, put some gun cotton in your ears, tie it around your neck, and you would have like a muffle. It also sweat rag, and you could use it to render a first aid type deal if you got wounded. The shoes, aboard ship, usually you didn't wear shoes because the decks were smooth, and you also climbed the rigging. The shoes themselves were very flexible. Some had buckles, some didn't have buckles. The pants are wide-legged in case you get tossed overboard. You can get out of your trousers really fast. And they also, when you're holystone in the deck, you can roll your trousers up over your knees so they don't get dirty.
All right, well, I want to thank you, and we'll be right back with more. Now, wasn't that fascinating? I mean, you felt like you were really there watching an actual person who defended Fort McHenry. And that's the kind of information we need to feel proud of our city and proud of Fort McHenry, a national landmark. So we'll be right back with more Eye on Baltimore.
There's the young lady in the day dress. Again, it was considered improper for a lady to have her head covered outside, like I was talking about earlier. But again, if you are into shopping, you can buy a bonnet, but for a real flair, might I suggest that you consider a turban. You may say, well, why a turban? Why are these great ladies wearing turbans? These became very popular when Napoleon invaded Egypt in 1798. They discovered and brought back the Rosetta Stone. And this introduced a whole new way of, again, the way to bring the Middle East back here to, in a sense, the American West. Newspaper accounts extol the virtues of the Far East.
Here, talk about your headgear. Stephanie, this is Stephanie, by the way.
I am wearing a turban, which was made famous by Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison wore many different kinds of turbans, different colors. This was influenced partially by Napoleon conquering Egypt. The turban I'm wearing right now is actually tied myself. Some of the other woman that was with me actually wore it where it was on a form, tied, and then she sewed it on to make it easier. So this is actually tied, and then it's the same thing like the shawl I'm wearing. It's the same kind of material.
Well, it really matches up well with your dress. Talk about your material. What is that dress made of?
This dress is made of cotton. Women's dresses would be made out of cotton if you were middle class, upper class. Lower, poorer women would have been wearing linen. Linen is cheaper to get to make dresses. All the dresses would be made by the women themselves. My pattern, since it is a large pattern and the dark color, means that I'm probably an upper middle class woman. If the print was bigger than your thumb, it meant that it cost more to make. Smaller print is cheaper to make. Underneath, I'm wearing a cotton chemise, which is almost like a cotton nightgown, and then a heavy cotton canvas stay, which is similar to a corset.
Hey, Stephanie, talk about your gloves.
My gloves are kid leather. Usually when you see them, they're very small, and then once you wear them, they stretch out. Women also would have wore cotton gloves. These are a little bit more expensive to get. They also would have wore short gloves. You would always make sure that you show as little arm as possible. Because if you're out in the sun, you would get sun, and that would signify to somebody that you work outside. So you're poor, you're a lower class. If you were pale, because in 1812, pale was a signal of beauty, and it meant that you didn't have to be outside.
That is amazing. Okay, so the whole style of the fashion show was a slice of 1812 life.
Yes.
So who would you be? If I were to appear in a time machine in 1812 and I saw you, what could I decide about your stature in society?
I would probably be upper middle class. I might be on my way to a dinner party, which would be like early afternoon. I might have, during the day, been wearing a fancier bonnet, but decided to do the turban because I'm going to be going out in the city of Baltimore.
For you, what is it that you want to talk about today?
Mostly that regardless of what woman's status was in society, with the British coming in 1814, all the citizens had something at stake if the British would have succeeded in taking Fort McHenry. There was 50,000 citizens that many of them were on their rooftops watching and hoping that the fort could withstand the British onslaught. That's also the reason why there were so many people up at Patterson Park. You know, they had been building entrenchments to protect their city, not only their livelihoods, but also the women, the children, because if the British take Baltimore, what difference, who knows what they might do to us? It might be, you know, they might take the women, kill the men. It wouldn't really matter what your status is in society. We all had a common goal in making sure that our city did not end up like Washington, D.C. And another thing to keep the British, a lot of the merchants sunk their ships, their livelihoods, to go across the harbor to keep the British from being able to get closer. Because many of your British gunships are heavy gunships, so the Chesapeake Bay is shallow, many of them would run aground. That's why so few ships got close within the range of Fort McHenry's guns during the bombardment.
Well, thank you for that bit of insight, Stephanie, and we'll be right back with more. Now, wasn't that exciting? A young woman talking about how she felt as an actual character involved in that War of 1812, the bombardment of Fort McHenry, what her reaction was, how it felt to her to be there in that scene. And that's what we're all about here on Eye on Baltimore. We're going to be back with more. Don't go anywhere.
Totally on board with fashion. You'll notice the hat, the chapeau de bras, that could be worn under the arm. The British wore it fore and aft. Napoleon wore it side to side. Americans, being neither pro-French nor pro-British, cocked it off to the side and simply called it a cocked hat. We can also see how, in a way, civilian dress influences the military, and vice versa. Look at that fine cloak, ladies and gentlemen. Notice on his left shoulder, you'll see a gold bullion epaulette. Gold being the color of artillery. The epaulette on the left shoulder designates lieutenant. Perhaps this is why the British call them lieutenants, because they wore their epaulette on the left side. Uniform, interestingly enough, the design for guys from Fells Point who wanted to look like Westerners while living on the East Coast.
Wow, we are having so much fun at the Maryland Historical Society. I'm having a lot of fun with it. What really impressed me was a couple of young African Americans who were involved in this fashion show, 1812. And take a look at what they did.
A seaport. So here we see African Americans and white sailors. This is the epitome of form-following function. Sailors have to work the lines of a ship. They have to work the docks of Baltimore. These short jackets are the best. You can see they're still tight underneath the armpits, but no long tails here, nothing that can get caught on anything. Worn open, a lot of freedom of movement. Herman Melville talked about his white jacket in the summer and his blue jacket in the winter. You can also see Mr. Coots there doffing his hat. He might also put...
And what was really exciting for me was that I had a chance to talk to them out of costume, and this is what they shared. And this is Kwame, and he was in the Fabulous Fashions of 1812. Kwame, explain what your costume was, because this is not the costume, folks. It's a different costume. Talk about the costume you had on.
Well, my costume basically consisted of a couple of parts. There were these sailor pants, which had flat front trousers, which they unbutton in the front, just so like if you had to use the bathroom or anything, and they tie in the back. Then there was an undershirt, which was bluish plaid, a waistcoat, which is like a modern day vest, but it has 2 layers, one in the front, one in the back, and a nice sailor's coat to go over top. And
did you wear a hat?
I did not have a hat. I wasn't that high up in rank to wear a hat.
Ah.
Yeah.
Also, you were African American.
Yes, one of the 20% of us that were there.
So 20% of our Navy in 1812 was African American.
Yeah, there was a huge African American population there because there was really no other job that you could do back then. You could be like a tailor or a domestic worker, but who really wants to do that after winning their freedom?
How did you feel about portraying an African American in 1812 in the Navy? Talk about how it personally affected you.
I guess it was sort of weird because there was one other African American sailor and we were the only African American people in the fashion show at all. So like it was weird because it's like you're going back into your heritage and your culture. And like people usually don't like to talk about it because people like to keep race under the table and like not like to ignore it nowadays and act like everything didn't happen. And most people don't even know that they were African American sailors. So they think the whole entire Navy was white and that we were still slaves at this time, but they were like a huge free population in Baltimore.
Well, you did a good job, Kwame.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll be right back with more. Hey, how'd you feel about this?
I really enjoyed this fashion show because most of the time I'm behind the scenes and I do most of the research. So it was actually fun to put on the costume or uniform and just like go out there and be the character because most of the time I'm doing it for someone else and like you don't really get to be recognized. And it was fun to be on stage for once.
All right. Kwame, do you have any closing thoughts for me here?
Yeah, it was a really fun experience and I would love to do it again. And I'd like to thank you for interviewing me for this process.
And thank you for being a part of it.
Oh.
And we have Christian here, and Christian had the pleasure of being a part of the Fabulous Fashions of 1812. And Christian, what was your character? Talk about it.
I was one of the African American sailors. Part of that small portion that was actually there. It was a very nice experience. Another friend of mine was also an African American sailor, and we had a jacket, we had vest underneath, a shirt under that. I had a tan, red, and blue on. He had a little bit of plaid mixed with some stripes. I had a really good time. It was really fun.
All right, we'll talk some more about how you personally felt being a character from 1812.
Act as if we were soldiers, acting, proper as we should, because, back then we didn't have that many rights, but, we were free at the time. There were a lot of free slaves at that time. I did my best, at least I thought I did, so.
Well, you represented the African Americans who served in 1812 in the Navy, and I believe it was 20% of the Navy at that time.
Right.
Right. Did you have to do anything special with your hair, or did anybody tell you how to walk or talk or be a part of this fashion program?
No, not really. We just had to, put on a costume and sort of.
Now, isn't that fascinating? It's wonderful to know that we have students at the Baltimore School for the Arts who are so excited about learning how to be actors and models and professionals in the broadcasting industry. And these two shared what they got out of that experience of being in a fashion show for the year 1812. Wow. Well, we're going to be back after we take this break. Don't go anywhere. That drummer really was great. I mean, he was terrific. But that's the drumming that would have been done in the year 1812. And you know something? I had a chance to interview him. Here's what he said. This is Dan Morrison, and he's dressed as a drummer boy from 1812. Dan, how did you get in character for this performance?
Alright, so I'm a volunteer at Fort McHenry National Park and Historic Shrine. I've been volunteering there for 5 or 6 years now. I believe I started when I was in 4th grade. And basically every weekend during the summer we have living history there, where I and some of the other volunteers there, and park rangers as well, go out and do performances and demonstrations about what a drummer during the War of 1812 would have done, daily responsibilities, things like that.
All right, describe your costume.
So I'm wearing a fatigue cap right now. Normally when you are outside, you will be wearing a shakeout, which is a tall black leather hat, but for when you're not doing labor, you would wear the fatigue cap, because during the early 19th century, you always wore a hat outside, or else it'd be like not wearing shoes today. You just do it. I'm wearing a wool coat dyed red to signify that I am a musician. During the War of 1812, the regular the regular army would have worn blue, all blue here, and as you can see, the yellow trim here signifies that I'm an artillery musician. Musicians didn't wear blue though, they wore red, so that officers could find them quickly on the battlefield. Because the real purpose of a musician isn't to play music, it's to signal other people to do things. So if we're in battle and the officer needs a signal sent, look for the musician in red because it stands out.
All right, now how did you achieve the color red in 1812?
Well, everything was dyed with natural ingredients, so I believe it was actually with ladybugs. I'm not sure if that's true, but I believe that's what it is. I know that's what they used for a lot of lipsticks and other cosmetic things.
All right, and of course you're carrying a sword. So as
Yes.
a musician, there were times when you had to go into battle.
The musicians did go into battle, however they were normally behind lines. The sword is more of a symbolic thing. It symbolizes the ability to give a command. I'm not authorized to draw the sword for any reason whatsoever, but as, like I said earlier, we relay commands given from officers. So that's what the sword represents.
Talk about your background, being at Fort McHenry.
Well, I really do enjoy social studies in school. Currently, as an elective, I take a second social studies class in addition to the one that everybody else takes. I take 2 foreign languages instead of 1 like most people. I take Spanish as well as Chinese.
I'm still working on it. What advice do you have for other students who aren't taking full advantage of the educational opportunities that they have?
Well, a lot of people, they'll see what I do and they'll ask me why. They'll be like, history's so boring. But really, if you just give it a chance and you open your mind up to other aspects of life besides the normal things that everybody likes to do, sports, social media, etc., things like that, then you'll find that there are things that are enjoyable, especially in history. A lot of people think that it's not important because it already happened. It's the past. Why is that important? But, well, it's important so that you know what not to do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't see how that is going to be enjoyable to portray, things that have already happened. But if you just give it a chance, you'll see that the people that you meet are very interesting, they're fun to talk with, and really the experiences that I've had have been pretty cool.
All right, well, I want to thank you, Dan, and we'll be right back with more. He's a wonderful young man. He's terrific. I'm so proud of him. Look, we're going to be back with more of Eye on Baltimore. Don't go anywhere. And this is fascinating. I'm just enjoying myself with this fabulous 1812 fashion show. We had young people, women, people who have maturity and experience in their life, but they're all the kind of people who were actually alive in Baltimore at the time of the bombardment of Fort McHenry. And that's a great moment in American history. The fort stood, the flag flew, and we got our American heritage because the people at Fort McHenry defended us. We have the clothing, the wonderful fashions, and also there were some ideas about how the fashions have evolved to today's standard of fashion. This is how we learn. We visit places like the Maryland Historical Society, Fort McHenry, and we look at pictures, we look at drawings, we get observations of what's available in the showcases at the Maryland Historical Society. We ask questions. This is how you learn. And that's what Eye on Baltimore is all about, taking you places where I enjoy learning. And the great thing about the 1812 fashion show is that it represented men's fashion. And of course, I love seeing how the men's hats and coats and, well, take a look at it.
Here we see Timber House. The no idea of the early 19th century. The fine topper hat. This is what perhaps some of the city council of Baltimore may have been wearing at the time. Newspaper involved were at the time the Niles Weekly Register. You'll notice he has trousers, no knee brief silk coat he wears. This is an example of informal clothing worn by men in the early 19th century.
Wow, that was terrific. But what I noticed was that the fashion was such a broad range of styles. There was the attire for the daytime, there was attire for the rich people, attire for the average person. There was evening wear, and the evening wear just blew me away. We have so much that we were so proud of to see men wearing and sharing during the 1812 era. 1812, what did people look like? How did they dress? What did men wear in 1812? Well, we'll be right back with more.
Guy Madison actually built the image of the First Lady. It wasn't just the President's wife anymore. It was the First Lady. Her different parties, soirees, and balls helped bring the political parties together and helped bring about unity of our government during the War of 1812. You also see Francis Scott Key wearing not only a fine beaver hat, but the bell crown. The bell crown again being fashionable in 1814. Notice how this is different from the copper.
So, welcome back to Eye on Baltimore. We had a woman who shared with us some wonderful information about Fort McHenry and how important it is for everybody to visit and share the experience of Fort McHenry. Here's Shantae Daniels.
And just call us and we'll be
Oh,
happy.
please repeat that telephone number.
410-878-6411.
All right. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I think that everyone should keep their ears to the ground because there's a lot more coming out of the Education Committee. There's a lot more things happening with the Baltimore National Heritage Area, and I think that we, as Baltimoreans, need to embrace our heritage because we did play a huge part in America's identity with the Star-Spangled Banner National Anthem. That's coming next.
All right, I want to thank Shantae Daniels and everybody that cooperated in making this fabulous fashion show of 1812 happen. And this is Pat Perluke, and you're one of the organizers. Where did the idea come from?
Well, we have an education committee that's a part of the War of 1812 bicentennial celebration. One of the significant projects that the education committee did for the War of 1812 and the bicentennial celebration in June was we created a passport, and the passport contains all of the historic sites of Maryland. An individual, if they get 20 or more stamps in their passport, qualifies for a coin. And that'll come from the Baltimore National Heritage Area. It's all surrounding the effort to promote the awareness of the War of 1812 in Maryland.
Well, thank you. So we want you to visit Fort McHenry. The lady told you, hey, visit Fort McHenry. It's a local treasure, it's a national treasure. Get your passport. You can get the signatures and you can get the stamps that are necessary to show people that you are aware that Fort McHenry is important to our national heritage. So